And we have liftoff. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the BGLiD webinar. I hope you are all doing well this morning, and thank you for joining us for what is a very big and popular session. For those that haven't met me before, my name is Warren Rendon. I'm the General Manager of CAS 360 BGLiD and the UK here at BGL, and I'll be steering the ship through the webinar today. Before I get started and go into all the content, obviously we'll talk very briefly about the products that BGL offers. Obviously BGLiD, which we'll be covering today. CAS 360, which is for all of your ASIC compliance requirements and AML compliance requirements now. Simple Fund 360 for all of your SMSF administration needs. Simple Invest for all of your investment software. And Smart Docs for basically turning paper to data and integrating with other systems. So before we start the content, I'm going to start by answering the 4 biggest questions that we get when we run these webinars. First of all, is it being recorded? Yes, the session is being recorded. Will you be sent the recording? Yes, you will be sent the recording. We will get that out to you in the next couple of days. Will you be sent the slides? Yes, you will be sent the slides as well. That will be attached to the email. And of course, can you ask questions throughout the webinar? Absolutely you can, but please use the Q&A box, okay? We'll be managing the questions. We've got Andy, who's a CAS 360 product manager, answering questions in that Q&A box. So if you have any questions, ask them there. I'll do my best to address and answer all of them. So what are we going to cover in today's session? So first of all, I'm going to go through an overview of the new AUSTRAC compliance requirements that are going to be part of, or potentially part of, the accounting industry. I'm then going to cover off how BGLiD can help with managing those compliance requirements. I'm going to go through an overview of BGLiD and a bit of a demo of BGLiD. We're showing some new software. This was just launched last week, our new AML compliance tab in CAS 360. So all of the software that I'm showing you today is live. It is in your software products today, not coming soon, today. It's there. I'll cover off on the BGLiD prices and attempt to answer every question. All right, so here we go. What's new? Well, from July 1, 2026, anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing, so it's AML and CTF, obligations will apply to more professional service firms. Okay, and these include real estates, lawyers, real estate agents, or lawyers, conveyancers, and accountants. So this is where we are. We have a new legislation that's coming in. It's going to be administered by AUSTRAC, and accountants are going to be captured and become part of the reporting entities. So that is why we're here, and I'll get into some more detail. So the first thing that we need to check is, are you going to be regulated? Now, there is a quiz or a little process on the AUSTRAC website that's currently available, and I certainly recommend you go down that path. But really, what I've got here are 4 of the most common services that accounting practices are offering. So are you appointing a person or acting as a director or secretary of a company, power of attorney for a legal arrangement, things like that. Now, generally, if you're appointing a company as director or secretary for a company, then that may fall under that process. Do you appoint a person or act as a nominee shareholder of a legal arrangement or a body corporate? Do you provide registered office address or principal place of business for a legal arrangement or a body corporate? Again, that would capture a lot of accountants. And do you create or restructure legal arrangements for or body corporates? So creating and establishing entities. Again, a lot of accountants will fall into that. Now, if you don't offer these services, as I said, there's a couple more services, but these are the most common. But these are what they call captured services. So if you are offering these services, then you are potentially going to be captured. So if you are offering those services, what do you need to do next? First and foremost, you need to enroll with AUSTRAC, and I'll go into these steps into a little bit more detail. You need to develop and maintain an AML or counter-terrorist financing program tailored to your business. You will need to conduct customer due diligence, report on certain transactions and suspicious activity, and obviously make and keep records. So let me go into these into a bit more detail. But first of all, sounds fun, doesn't it? So what I'm going to go through here is the first of those steps, which is to enroll and register with AUSTRAC. So enrollment involves providing information about your business, its structure, key personnel, and contact details. So this information is going to need to be provided to AUSTRAC as part of your enrollment. You must also notify changes of these details. So if there is changes to those key personnel and contact details in your firm, you will have an ongoing obligation with AUSTRAC to keep those updated. You must enroll with AUSTRAC within 28 days of providing a regulated service. So if you are going to provide one of those services, then you obviously need to enroll within 28 days of actually providing that service, which technically means you've got until the 29th of July to enroll. I wouldn't be cutting it that fine. So your business does need to have enrollment within 28 days of the commencement date. If I just go back a step, it does look like enrollment will open up in March of 2026. So you'll have a sort of a 4 or 5 month window there. So once you have completed the enrollment, we are then up to the stage of developing and maintaining an AML CTF program, essentially a set of AML policies. So the AML program, according to the sort of the information we're getting from AUSTRAC at the moment, must contain certain things. So it must contain your money laundering, terrorist financing, risk assessment process. So to identify and assess the risk of this happening in the businesses that you that may reasonably face in providing these services, right? So essentially the risk assessment process and then the policies. So develop and maintaining these AML policies, procedures, and systems that control and manage and mitigate business risks. Okay, so we need to essentially set up some risk assessment policies and procedures. There's a couple of dot points here. So first of all, must be documented and approved by senior management. It must be independently evaluated once every 3 years. And I think most importantly, there must be an AML compliance officer appointed. Okay, so the firm will effectively have to appoint an AML compliance officer. Obviously, if you're a sole practitioner, that will need to be you. But if there is obviously a bigger practice, then obviously one of the members of the staff, and they do say senior staff, senior members, needs to be the compliance officer. Step 3 is conducting customer due diligence. So obviously CDD helps you understand who your customers are and the risks that they bring to your business. So with customer due diligence, this has been around the industry for a while. Certainly the TPB has some recommendations, and I use the word recommendations carefully because that's what it is, for verifying your customer's identity. What AUSTRAC will do is essentially make that legislation, or what this law will do is essentially make that legislation. So make it a legal requirement as opposed to a recommendation. So initial CDD, establishing information about a customer on reasonable grounds before providing them with a service. So you must establish if the customer is a beneficial owner or an agent. Okay, first and foremost, are they who they say they are? Have you been able to verify their identity? Okay, so that's really step 1. And that may be what you're doing today, which is great. But if you're not doing it today, maybe it's a good time to start. But certainly come 1 July next year, it will become a legal requirement. And then we get into the area of AML and politically exposed persons and things and people that have sanctions. So are these people subject of any targeted financial sanctions? Okay, so when you are working with this person, you will obviously be required to do an ID verification, so an ID check, but also a sanctions check. Are they a politically exposed person? Okay, and do they have any sort of exposure to people in government, or are they in government? Okay, so you have to do a check on that. And are they a relative or a close associate of a politically exposed person? Now, in theory, and I'm providing general information here, not legal advice, but in theory, this doesn't mean that they can't be a customer. It just means that there will be heightened requirements for people that fall into these particular categories. And then there's the obviously ongoing customer due diligence. So you are also required to monitor and manage sort of the risks throughout the customer relationship. And this is sort of that ongoing as I said. So within that particular business, is something happening that would be potentially major that that may trigger a heightened level of I suppose due diligence being required. So, I mean, the classic example here would be a small business that you're working with and providing these services for, and all of a sudden they will come in. All of a sudden they have an external shareholder that comes in, maybe a foreign external shareholder that comes in, buys a big stake in the business, and then starts to create some loans and things like that, right? So, you know, whilst I'm just giving a general example, that's the sort of significant change to a business that might trigger a heightened level of due diligence being required, because the business itself that you're providing those services for goes from being a well-known business to all of a sudden an unknown or potentially unknown business, right? So you've just got to obviously monitor those sorts of things, and certainly any suspicious activity, we'll get into that, but updating the customer risk profile is what I'm talking about with that sort of significant transaction coming in, and then potentially reviewing and updating and be re-verifying details as required. There has been a question already about this, but there is a part of the legislation or guide around pre-commencement, and these are essentially your existing customers. So you are not required to perform initial or ongoing CDD on a pre-commencement customer. So a pre-commencement customer is a customer before 1 July. However, you will be if certain things happen. So if there is a suspicious matter report, and I'll get into what they are, but if there is something that has happened in that business that may trigger a change, so a significant change, and is there a significant change to the nature and purpose of that business relationship? Right, so they're things to look out for, but essentially existing customers won't need to be by default re-verified or rechecked. However, if there is a significant event in one of those businesses or for one of those customers, then potentially it will be. Okay. Then there is the requirement to report certain transactions and suspicious activities. Okay, so the types of reports that you may need to submit to AUSTRAC. Okay, and this is where essentially that process of, okay, has something happened in the business? And there may not always be a situation where you know everything that's happening in that business, right? But if you are aware, then you may need to report certain things. So the first one and the most common one is what's called a suspicious matter report, so an SMR. These are quite common and are regularly lodged by banks and things like that. But when you suspect on reasonable grounds that a person is not who they claim to be, or that a matter is linked to a criminal activity or proceeds of crime. So they're sort of the things that you would need to submit an SMR for. So if someone come to the business, for example, and you suspected clearly that they were not who they claimed to be, then there would potentially be a requirement for you to submit an SMR. Okay, so that's sort of the level here that we're talking about, and then it goes down to sort of that criminal activity sort of layer. And if you reasonably suspect that is what's going on, so genuine fraud, genuine criminal activity, that's what you would effectively need to lodge an SMR for. So it's not about, well, I say this carefully, it's not about you going through the books every day and checking what's going on. There are significant triggers here where someone is clearly not who they are, not who they say they are, or there's criminal activity. And then there's the threshold transactions. So sort of are these physical currency transactions over certain amounts. Obviously international value transfer service reports, right, where there's sort of big international transfers going on. And then obviously cross-border movements. So there are some key triggers for all of these sort of reports. And then obviously that last one is an annual compliance report. So this will be potentially an obligation of the practice to submit an annual report summarising how they've met their AML and CTF obligations. Okay, so they're sort of some of the reports and some of the transaction monitoring that will need to go on. And then obviously step 5 is making and keeping records. So So you must make and maintain accurate and complete records for 7 years. So this is a AUSTRAC requirement to keep these records. And obviously these records need to go into a little bit of detail. First and foremost, maintaining your AML program, the customer due diligence that you go through, any transaction records that are around that suspicious area. Also, staff training. So there is a requirement for ongoing staff training and keeping your staff obviously educated, and any AML audit results as well. So there'll be a whole new industry of AML auditors, I suspect, and there'll be obviously those AML audits. So in CAS 360, as I mentioned, we've released an AML compliance tab that will really help you bring all of this together. It doesn't do every single thing, but it will help really bring all of it together. And now we wait. AUSTRAC are obviously still working through and providing specific guidance. So we are expecting this hopefully later this year. Obviously in August, so at the end of last month, this information was tabled in Parliament. This legislation, sorry, was tabled in Parliament. So it is obviously still going through those particular lawmaking processes. It's not officially law just yet, but obviously it is a law that's had a lot of public consultation and a lot of information, and obviously looking to start next year. So that's a bit about the legislation, and hopefully, I know there's some questions coming through, but hopefully I've been able to paint a picture for you and give you a bit of a guideline of sort of of what is coming. And now what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how BGLiD can help. Okay, and the products and services that BGLiD we've created here at BGL can help you meet these compliance requirements. So first and foremost, BGLiD is a client identity verification and PEP and sanctions screening service. So not only are we doing the KYC, the Know Your Client process, we are also doing the AML step of checking sanctions, checking watch lists, checking your PEP screening for these particular individuals. Okay, BGLiD, like a lot of BGL products, is specifically designed for accounting firms. So we have built this to help you meet these particular requirements. BGLiD is built into your existing BGL applications. What we wanted to be really clear on is that with BGLiD, you don't need to go and get another piece of software. You don't need to go and add all of your contacts to another piece of software. You have so much data in the BGL product suite and your BGL products. So what we have built is BGLiD that links into that. All BGLiD data is linked to contacts in your BGL applications. So you go into CAS, for example, or Simple Fund, for example, and you can see that particular person's BGLiD data. There's no extensive setup or new application required. Simply just add your credit card or use your firm's existing credit account. Okay, so you can, BGLiD, as I mentioned before, all of our products I'm showing you today is live, and you can try it out if you haven't used it. So what BGLiD does is a couple of things, and I'll go through this. First of all, it will verify the identity of the documents that your clients, the ID documents that your clients provide with the issuer. Okay, so passport for Department of Foreign Affairs, driver's license for state and road authorities, and obviously Medicare through the Department of Health. So we are obviously verifying that these documents are legitimate documents. There's a question here, can BGLiD be used to be verified by overseas clients? Look, the answer is yes, but it does come down to certain particular things. And you just need to essentially pick the right check that we're going to do. But if they have an Australian ID, where it's an Australian driver's license and Medicare, then obviously they can go through that. Where they have a passport, we need to know if the passport is registered in Australia or not, because it will just determine the particular check. So if the person is a non-Australian passport holder, but they maybe are going through PR or something like that, then it's likely that their passport will be registered in Australia, and we'll be able to verify that passport. Okay, if they're, for example, a complete foreigner, never been to Australia, they just need to use a different process. And that process we haven't built, but there will be a new process for that. BGLiD will also complete your AML screening, your PEP and global sanctions screening, and also one more that we've added is adverse media screening. So this is an extra selection that you can put on, and I'll show you how to do that, but we can also offer adverse media screening. This is all done through a provider that we utilize, Frankie One. So they're an Australian business that we've built into. They aggregate a lot of this data. You receive an instant result with an identity verification report. Okay, so you don't need to wait a week. Obviously, once the check is being sent out and completed by your client, we verify the result straight away, and it will come straight into the system. So how does it work? So there's two types of ID verifications that we will do. And I'll show you the request for verification, but it just depends on where the data sits. So the request for verification, which is the most popular at the moment, this is where BGLiD, through your BGL product, emails your client requesting them to complete an ID verification. So it's pretty simple. The system sends an email out to your client. Your client completes their ID verification themselves, and you get the result. Okay, pretty simple. The second one is verify ID. This is where you, for example, have the ID in front of you. Maybe you're in a meeting with the client themselves and they pass you their ID. Well, if they do that, you can go into BGLiD, into CAS 360 or Simple Fund 360, type in the ID information and click verify. And again, you get the instant result. So both of these obviously are available. It's important to both methods that consent, okay, is there. You are not able to run these ID verifications without consent, okay? So consent is obviously very important. You can't just grab someone's ID and go and verify it. Now, I'll talk about how the system is today. So BGLiD does not store the identity data in BGL products, okay? Once the information is verified, the BGL products will have the result, and they have a little bit of information about what was used, i.e. a Victoria's driver's license. We also will store the expiry date on that document, but we won't store all of the data on the ID document, just what document was used and the expiry. So we don't store that, and we don't have that. We don't have that in your systems. Now I say for now because if AUSTRAC come out and say you must store it, then obviously we'll build the system that stores it. But right now today, we don't store the whole ID, just to make that clear. And you get the ID obviously result with the document that was used. For PEP, AML, news, this is all public data. Okay, so it will be stored and kept in your system. If someone has a political exposure, for example, or an AML record, this is obviously different to their ID, because generally this is websites or news articles. BGLiD has been around for over 12 months now, and we've added a lot of features and functionality to it. So first and foremost, we have automatic retry. So if a client goes through their process, enters in their wrong details, maybe they get a number wrong on their ID and it fails, the system will automatically send them an email and give them another attempt for free at completing their ID. So we have automatic retry. Obviously, if they fail twice, you might have to send another check, but yeah, they do have automatic retry. Obviously, we added Medicare verification. We also have two source document verification. So, and this completely depends on the firm's AML policy, for example, but did you want your clients to use two source documents? Okay, so driver's license and passport, for example, or driver's license and Medicare. We also support New Zealand driver's licenses. We do sell CAS 360 and BGLiD in New Zealand as well. We've added a lot of the automation that you come to know from BGL products. So we do have automated email reminders for clients that haven't completed their ID checks yet, and also automatic confirmation emails on completion. So you'll get an email, and so will your client if you choose for them to get one on completion. Obviously, full email templates, outbox reports are there. And the big one at the bottom, biometric scanning. So we do offer a number of different verification products that you can utilize. And again, it comes down to the firm and what you want to use. But we do have a biometric scanning workflow as well, where the user has to take a selfie, for example, or I'll take a photo of their ID and a selfie, and there is a biometric scanning process that goes over the top. So we do have that as well. What we've also added, and you may have seen this in Simple Fund and Simple Invest 360, is your ID, BGLiD integration in there. So this was released in January, and obviously been subsequent updates as well. But you will be able to see obviously your BGLiD results in both CAS 360 and Simple Fund 360. And best of all, if you have the integration between the two products turned on, then obviously we'll be sharing the result between products. Okay, so if you do have that integration on, you'll be able to share that result. Again, we're sharing the result, not the ID data, just the result. I'll touch very quickly on what biometric scanning is. So biometric scanning is two levels of verification. So level one is obviously the government ID verification that we verify with the source. Yes, a demo is coming. And then we do a biometric scan, which is basically a photo of the ID and the photo that's in the ID and the selfie photo. You do have to take a selfie for biometric scanning. And there's obviously a process there of matching. This process does use AI and matches 24 data points to make sure that the photo is the same as the selfie. And then really you'll get three types of sort of that result. You'll get the government ID verification, the AML screening, and obviously the PEP and sanctions, and also the biometric scanning result as well. So benefits of BGLiD. So obviously simple access. It's all available to you now. You don't have to do anything. Go to your BGL products, CAS or Simple Fund, Simple Invest, and it's all there. There's no lock-in contract or monthly minimums. It's simple, pay as you go. So if you wanted to try one, you could try one. We really want this model because if your firm onboards a lot of people in 1 month, but not many people the next month, for example, you just pay as you go. You pay for what you use. You don't have to sign up to a 100 check monthly minimum, for example. It's made by BGL, so it's made by us. Hopefully you like us. And it's supported by the BGL support. So what I'll go through now is a demo of the BGLiD process and also the compliance tab. So just bear with me for a second. So what I've got here is my CAS 360 screen. And what I'm going to touch on first is just the process of completing an ID verification. Now, I'm in the officer screen, but I can do this through the contact screen as well. I'm just going to go to myself and I'm going to click on resend ID verification. Here is probably the most important screen, which is the screen where you select the type of check that you're going to send out. Okay, so again, this comes down to the firm's choice and what type of checks you want to be doing. So we've got a government ID check, okay, and this is obviously our first check. It's $7, and you can verify with one or two sources, and this will check your government ID. It'll check your AML and your global sanctions database. So AML includes PEP, for example. It's just the way that things are bundled up. But effectively, that's a $7 check, and it will do one ID, one or two IDs, and it will check those databases. The advanced check is the same, but it includes adverse media screening. Okay, so it's the same check as the government ID check with adverse media. And then the one I mentioned before is your biometric check. So this does a biometric face scan and the three other checks. Okay, so it does depend on which check you want to use. Just for the case of the example, I'm just going to go with a standard government ID check. You click proceed, and up will come an email template, which you have full control over. Okay, so you've got full control over that email template, and you can send that off. Here's how the email will be received by your client, and they can go through the process of verifying the identity. So click on verify identity. Because we don't have enough two-factor codes in life, we've added an extra one for your client. So they will receive a two-factor code to their email, and I'm just waiting for mine to come through. Here we go. So we go through that process, and what we will then have is that process to complete that ID verification. This will just load up. This is a biometric scan, which was not what I was planning to show. Anyway, I'll show you the first screen, but that's obviously the QR code. But give me 2 seconds. I'll send another one and show you how this works for the standard ID. So my screen's just paused now, guys. So I will just get the next step up for you. All right. You should be able to see my screen again now. It's going to go through that process. Okay. I didn't want to go through this process. Anyway, just give me 2 seconds because I will actually show the biometric. So what I'll do is I'll just jump back and I'll walk through this biometric video because we're getting a lot of questions about biometric anyway. So I'll just share this. All right, so let's get this to go through. So in this video, I will show that biometric. Obviously, I can't do biometric live because I'm not keen on sharing everyone's, showing my ID to everyone. So here we go. We'll go through the email step that I've gone through and we will go through that two-factor process. So very quickly going through that two-factor, and that will then launch up the screen that I didn't want to launch. So this is my, where you basically scan your QR code. And it will go through the process of asking for a photo. That's obviously consent. So there has been a few questions about consent. So this is how consent works. And then obviously selecting that ID card. So for driver's license, we need a front and back photo because there is information on the back of driver's licenses in some states. Passport, obviously, we only need one photo. So that's taken, and then we'll get the back of the ID here. And here comes the all-important selfie. So there's Doobie, who's the head of development for CAS 360. We go through that process. So that process will then go through and verify. Obviously, in our example, Doobie is using a fake ID. So his ID is going to fail. Obviously, we can't show real IDs, but that is an example of that biometric workflow. What I will now go and show you is the compliance tab that we just released. So if you go into your companies, you will now see a new tab at the end called compliance. And this is our AML compliance workflow. And this is where we really want all of that ID data and all of the data that you're storing for those particular companies coming in. This compliance tab makes it really is a key reason why the best place to store this data is in CAS 360 because you already have all of your company information in CAS 360 and we just got one more tab that will do all of your AML compliance. We've tried to make it really easy. So first of all, we turn on AML compliance on. Then we enter in the nature of business relationships. So these are some of the standard business relationships that are available on the AUSTRAC website. So providing registered office address services and appointing a person. So these are pretty standard workflows for an accounting practice. And this is obviously the relationships that I've selected. You can select more relationships if there are more. There is a source of funds check that you could potentially do. So source of funds, source of wealth. In some cases, this might be required. And then we can go into the individuals. And this is where you start to see the power of CAS 360. If I go down to my dummy individual here, I've got Bruce. Now, the system has identified Bruce as a director in the company. If I scroll back up, I can see here that Andy is a 14.99% shareholder in the company. So CAS 360 is able to identify these key people in the company. If I go to Bruce, I can see all of Bruce's information here. So he's come through because I've completed Bruce's ID. He's a low risk. His verification succeeded. And I can see his government ID details. Okay, so I can see here that we've used a Victorian driver's license. Obviously, again, it's all dummy data. And we've also gone through a successful PEP and sanctions. So what you can see here is we've got all of this particular information for all of these individuals. What I can do then is go through to my risk assessment stage, okay? And this is where you can put in additional things about the level of risk assessment, okay? So is this a high risk business? Is this a low risk business? So, and what sort of categories of risk are there? So this is for obviously for you to enter in, and then obviously the particular risk factors that would go in, okay? And you can put in some notes and some attached documents there. And then obviously I can go down here and select those particular levels of risk. Okay. Scroll down, I've got notes, and then I have a risk review process where I can obviously send this data off for review. And I also have the ability to download a full compliance report for this particular company. So if I go to that, I can see here I've got a full compliance report that CAS 360 has produced that basically has all of that data in it. So hopefully that's a good overview of the compliance tab in CAS 360. In terms of prices, I did touch on this, but obviously those particular checks, there's three prices, $7, $9, and $10, depending on the particular check that you are doing. And there's a breakdown of what those checks are. Now, the scary part. Are there any questions? Obviously, I've gone through and I've spoken a fair bit about the AML compliance requirements. I've also taken you through a demo of some of the features in CAS 360. I'll head over to the questions section now. The guys have done a pretty good job. There's 44 that have been answered. So, but if you do have any questions, please type them in now and I'll do my very best, guys, to get through them. All right, here we go. Does the integration include Xero for BGL identity verification results? Great question, Kathy. We are working, or hopefully working with Xero to push the BGLiD results into XPM. However, you could help us out by maybe sending Xero an email asking them to allow us to spread that, to send that result to you. So if I do have a request for anyone here, please ask Xero to open up their APIs so that we can push this data to them. That would be great. Certainly, we have built BGLiD with APIs so that other services can use BGLiD and can retrieve the results. Obviously, you have to verify and obviously authenticate the integration, but we have certainly built the capacity for other applications to integrate. Which brings on to the next question here was, does this integrate with databases, e.g. FYI? Again, this a very similar answer. We have built APIs for that integration and we are working with a number of parties to be able to share the results and share the document, which might be a little bit more relevant to FYI in those particular cases. So hopefully that answers that question there, Mark. Always concerning when the number of questions keeps going up. Here we go. Next one. If using biometric, do we get to see the selfie taken? At this stage, yes, Jessica, you do get to see the selfie. We do put it into the report. So yes, at this stage you do, yes. Is there any way you can build the tax agent nomination into this ID process? Assume the answer is no, but would be my dream. Megan, we're always open to new ideas, but I'm happy that I'm not happy, but I can be clear and say to you that right now it doesn't have the tax agent nomination, but I wouldn't rule it out in the future. Is this verification only required for company office holders or for all new clients? So it's a good question. This is obviously one that we're sort of loath to provide legal advice, but there is some sort of mention in the AUSTRAC requirements around not just directors, but directors, shareholders, beneficial owners, trustees, and beneficiaries of trusts. Okay, so the net could be cast quite wide. But I don't want to provide full legal advice, but yeah, there's certainly those sort of positions are ones that that could be under scrutiny. Next question, can this also capture TFNs? Similar to the question before, currently it does not capture TFNs, okay? Potentially we could put that in, but right now today it doesn't capture TFNs. Does the proposed legislation apply retrospectively? That is there an obligation for individuals or companies were incorporated prior to 1 July? So Joseph, it all comes down to, and I sort of touched on it a little bit earlier around pre-commencement. So those particular clients that are clients prior to 1 July fall under the potential pre-commencement. I certainly would keep my eyes on that and see if that changes at all. But for now, the understanding is no. However, clients post that 1 July will. There is a requirement, however, if there is a sort of a particular transaction or event that would potentially be suspicious, that there might need to be some sort of checking for those particular pre-commencement clients. Hopefully that answers that question, but can't give a concrete answer because I don't really have a concrete answer. What if we know the customer as an individual? Will this checking process also identify any companies this person is involved in? Mitch, look, not at this stage. The process is focused on verifying the validity, I guess, of that particular individual. So they are who they say they are? Do they have any potential AML flags? Rather than checking companies that they're also involved in, there is an ASIC search that we could potentially look at for that particular reporting. So yeah. Question here, can BGL produce the annual compliance reports that will be required? Look, Melissa, we're still waiting on guidance on what exactly is needed in those annual compliance reports, but we are certainly trying to build reports that will help. Okay, so yes. Just a question here about capturing data. Look, again, it's something that we will look at around capturing extra data in BGLiD. Same question about MYOB. Yeah, again, we're talking with a number of parties to integrate and get the ID results into other applications. We think that the whole solution will work better if we're able to share the verified results as opposed to keeping it into one system. That's certainly the philosophy for a lot of things with BGL, and it's no different for BGLiD. Will there be a tab similar to director identification number when an ID has not been verified? The answer is yes, Amelia. You just need to activate it, right? So it just needs to be toggled on, and there is an alert that's actually there today. So that alert is there. But yes, obviously, come 1 July next year, it'll be much, much more frequent. If onboarding entities which are established before 1 July do not need these ID checks, also if onboarding post 1 July, do we need to do our ID checks or request proof of checks? Yeah, Emily, just with that question, obviously there is a particular date so 1 July. Anyone that you're taking on as a new client from 1 July is probably the right wording. So is this client a new client from 1 July? You will need to go through certain processes to know your client and go through that particular screening. If they are a client before then potentially not. Could you please clarify the $10,000 transaction reporting a bit more, as it could impact every single one? Look, I'm not going to give complete advice here because it's a bit still up in the air. But I don't believe the intention is every transaction for 10,000. But look, I'm not 100% sure, and it's best to just wait for the guidance on this to sort of see what is potentially required around big transactions. Okay. A lot of the time it is a bit more around the suspicious nature. But again, I think it's best we wait till we've got sort of concrete guidance on this. What I've tried to provide is sort of the guidance that's out there today, but I accept that it's not completely clear in every case. Is there a fee for the additional reporting? No, we give it to you for free as part of the product. So that compliance tab is free and available to all clients. The only thing you get charged for is obviously your CAS subscription that you're already paying for anyway. So another reason to use the AML compliance tab, and then obviously the ID verification through BGLiD. Is this required to accept new clients to complete the work, or just when we set up a company? Yeah, so Joanne, it all goes back to those what they call captured events, because I accept that not every service that you offer will be a captured event. So it does come back to those captured events, and are you providing those captured events for that particular client, right? So it may be a case that you are providing a service that isn't a captured event, and therefore you won't need to go through this. So it just depends on that captured event list. And I've tried to give a few examples, but the AUSTRAC website will have much more examples. And it does actually have, as I mentioned at the start, a quiz that we'll go through. There's a question here about suspicious transactions. If we have a client where we do work once a year, do we only report when we do that work? So reporting could be delayed. I think, yeah, I mean, this is one of the biggest challenges with obviously this particular reporting is finding out when. But more than anything with the suspicious transactions, is that company involved in criminal activity? Obviously, you can't, for example, know in advance. You only know when you know. So there is a requirement to report it quickly, but you obviously only know when you know. Hope that answers the question. Yeah, if the shareholder is a company slash entity, do we still need to do this process? I think that this is one of the big questions, because the answer is yeah, we will need to go through that process and verify the shareholdings and potentially verify the shareholdings and the beneficial owners of that particular entity. So, and this is sort of when the example I used before, because it's a big example, but if you had a small business that you were looking after, and then all of a sudden a big, not big, but just a foreign company came in as a major shareholder, then yeah, you would need to go through the process of verifying the identities of that foreign company that came in, and the people involved in that company. So that would be part of that sort of due diligence process of taking that on. Same would apply as if you were starting up to do that. So potentially, yes, you would need to verify who the shareholder is if it's a company, and the individuals, the ultimate beneficial owners and shareholders and directors of that particular company. So it does create quite a big web. Will the application function, supply, or assist with setting AML policies and procedures? I'll only talk about what it does today, which is it doesn't today. It's something that we're looking at, but it doesn't today is probably the best answer I can give you. We'll certainly look at what we can offer, but until we have an offering, I won't announce anything. Do you offer other services such as risk assessment to identify any risks and processing gaps to our existing AML process? Pretty similar to the above question. Yeah, we're looking at what we can do to help. Obviously, I'll focus a bit more on what we've got right now through the BGLiD and through that compliance tab. But yeah, we're always looking at what we can do to help and add more functions to it, and whether or not there's yeah, like a policy that we could provide or a sample or something. We'll see what we can do there. Is the reporting done through BGLiD as well? At this stage, no. AUSTRAC don't have any APIs that would allow us to report. Who knows if they do? Maybe one day they will. But right now, no. Does the client get notified if it has failed? Yes, they do. But you can choose to select that as on or off. So as part of that ID check, there is an email that says confirm on or off. If you want them to receive a completed email. But if they get failed, then yes, they do notify, because they get the automatic retry. Sorry if it's been asked or answered. When I complete the check, it says we might be included. Yeah. Do you have any guidelines from the regulators as to when we will know if we might? Yeah, I mean, we're all waiting for that, Kelly. That's really the answer that we're all waiting for. There is a list of services that are considered captured, and obviously they're working through those particular lists. It sort of goes back all the way to the start. If the services you are offered are not considered captured events, or not considered sort of services that need to be monitored, then potentially you don't need to do this. But I'd just keep checking that process on the AUSTRAC website, and as more information comes to light, as I said, the legislation was tabled in Parliament. It isn't finalised, so there will be more information coming out. And that's the most important thing. Always make sure and check that if you are actually required to do this. I will sort of say generally, the intention of the legislation is to capture accountants. Okay. If we submit a suspicious SMR report, are we required to inform the clients? Yeah. So there's some pretty clear rules on this, and I'll refer you to go to have a look at those rules. But yeah, you don't have to tell the person that you're lodging a suspicious report on them. But certainly check the laws. But yeah, it is obviously you don't have to call someone up and tell them. But check it. Can we test to try it out? Yes, all the features I've shown you today are live. So the BGLiD is live, the AML compliance tab is live. So it's all there today. Everything I've shown you in this session today is live and in your products right now. You can try it between now and when you go on lunch. Any advice how to market this to our clients? It clearly adds extra cost to our office. Should we simply absorb these costs? Oh, look, it's tough for me to advise an accounting firm. I've never run one. You guys would be far better at it than I. But this is a compliance requirement, and you're able to charge for that. So whether you include that as part of your overall fees or an extra fee, or I suppose it might depend on the engagement. But it's hard for me to advise. But yes, obviously there's extra costs and extra work involved. And if you're being paid to help the company comply and things like that, then it would be, I believe, reasonable to charge for it. Okay, next question. If we receive instructions to incorporate a company from an accountant, can we rely on that accountant's verification check? Oh, great question. Great question, just to the wrong person. Generally, yeah, you need to be satisfied that the person is who they say they are. But it's very tough for me to answer that question. Probably a better question for AUSTRAC and hopefully when the laws come out. We're a large group of companies and use CAS to incorporate and maintain our own companies. Our parent company is the ASIC agent for all companies. Will be required to do all of this. Again, Karen, it comes down to that check on the AUSTRAC website. But yeah, if you're setting up companies, appointing directors, and using a registered office, everything registered office address for clients, everything points to you needing to do this. Yeah. Yeah, there's a question here. Just the last webinar, did you not allow to tell the client? There is when you lodge a suspicious report. The question I got was, do you have to? I would certainly follow that up, but yeah, yeah. I don't want to give an answer that's wrong, but yes, yeah, I'll take that question. I'll take that comment on. Is there a fee of $7 to $10 per check or another subscription too? So Callie, just on that question, BGLiD is completely pay as you go. So there's no extra subscription. You pay as you use it. So it's just the cost for the check, and there's no extra cost on top of that. There we go. Wrapped up all the questions with 5 minutes spare. If there are any other questions, please feel free to send them through. We only got through 89. There we go. 90 if this one gets closed off. So 90 questions. Thank you very much for your time today, guys. Hope you enjoyed the session. And hopefully BGLiD and CAS 360 and Simple Fund 360, Simple Invest 360 can help guide you through these new legislation requirements. We'll do more webinars as well as more rules and legislation comes to light. But I'll take this moment now to say thank you all, and I hope you have a fantastic Thursday. Bye for now.